Everyone is trying to raise money from investors, but most entrepreneurs have no idea what they're doing. So in this video, we're going to be talking about how you can raise money from investors and how you can increase your chances of getting into an accelerator program. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Startup Studio. My name's Christian Peverelli. I'm the co-founder of We Are No Code. We teach entrepreneurs how to build their startups or their online businesses without any technical skills at all. So you can build your app, you can launch it in the market, and you can get first paying customers without writing a single line of code. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, comment. We will answer every single one of your questions and even sometimes shoot videos specifically based on the comments we get. So don't be shy. So the first thing to understand here is that there are really three paths that you can take as an entrepreneur, and probably a couple more as well. But the first one is to bootstrap, which means that, hey, you're generating revenue, you don't necessarily want to give up a portion of your company to investors, and you simply want to continue growing out your business organically, keep 100% of the shares, keep control, have the freedom. That is an awesome strategy, and we're seeing more and more founders that are taking this road. Now, the second path is to join an accelerator like Techstars, Y Combinator, or 500 Startups. There are many more out there, but those are kind of some of the major ones internationally. Now, these provide deeper mentorship. They help you prepare for fundraising. They help you train on the pitching. They're going to introduce you to lots of people. And in exchange, they're going to take about 7% of your company, and they'll be investing anywhere between $20,000 and $100,000 in cash. The third path you can choose is to go out there and raise money. You figured out the nuts and bolts about your business. Now you really want to go and scale, and you want to approach investors who are going to put money down for a portion of your capital, a portion of your shares of your company, or a portion of the ownership of your company to be able to accompany you along the way and to provide you with the fuel you need to go ahead and grow. Now let's talk about an important fact. When is the right time to start fundraising, right? Because every single moment that you're spending fundraising is a moment that you are not taking care of operations. So you have to understand that your operations or running your business will go slower as you are fundraising for your startup. So knowing when to actually invest time and energy into fundraising is super, super important. Now in 2019, a study was done by an investment firm called Wing Capital. They checked out lots of seed deals, so investment deals that are at the seed stage, which is the earliest stage of investment, and they realized that deals were increasingly going to startups with revenue. In fact, in 2010, there was only 9% of deals were going to startups with revenue, but by the time that 2019 came around, we were already at 67%. And that means that these days in 2022, there is literally about 80 to 85% of all deals are going towards startups with revenue, which means that you have to be much more prepared and you have to be further along to be considered for investment. Now, another very important point that you have to understand is that there are very different types of investors out there, right? And understanding that is going to help you when it comes to targeting the right people for you. Now, the first type of investor, and usually the first round of investment, the first $50,000 or $20,000, usually comes from the founder and friends and family. There's also a last F, which is called fool, and that's kind of people who don't really have experience with investing and are just excited about a specific idea. Now, the second type of investors that we talked about are these accelerator programs. They invest less, they provide support, but they take a percentage of your company. Now, the third type of investor is an angel investor. No, they do not come from the sky. They are high net worth individuals who are investing their own personal money into startups. And so it's a very different profile than what we find afterwards. Now, the final type of investor is a venture capital investor. Now, venture capital firms are professional investors. They go out there and raise funds to be able to invest in startups professionally. They're paid through a management fee and a success fee, and they essentially raise money from their own investors, anywhere between a couple $1 million and hundreds of millions of dollars. And essentially these LPs, who are the investors of the investors, invest in these companies because they don't have the skills to invest, and so they'd rather depend on qualified investors to do so. Now, when we talk about venture capital investors, each one of these firms has a different focus in terms of where they invest, and they also invest at different stages of the company. Awesome. So now that we've covered some of the basics, I wanted to jump into how to go ahead and fundraise. Now, every single one of these investors has a goal. Their goal is to mitigate risk when investing in a startup without missing out on the good deals. No one wants to have missed out on investing in Airbnb, Uber, etc. And that's a really important point because we're going to use it as part of this strategy. Now, an important thing to understand is that raising money from investors is similar to dating in the sense that you have to develop a relationship before you can commit to something more serious, right? We should be developing that relationship over time to find out whether they're a good investor for us as well. Because remember, this is a two-way street. It's not just about who is going to give you money. It's also about, hey, I'm gonna have to interact with this person for the next couple of years. Is this an individual who I think I will get along with? Is this an individual I think will be able to add value to my startup, etc., etc. So what's important to understand is that on one end, we want to start talking to investors before we need the money in the bank. On the other hand, if we approach investors and we have no idea what we're talking about and we're not prepared, then we are gonna have a bad first impression and it's very unlikely we're gonna be able to get a next meeting. So we really want to understand all the basics around fundraising and make sure that we're approaching it in a professional way. And so on the other hand, we want to make sure we reach them early enough so we can build that relationship for when we do need money. And there's this classic saying that says if you ask investors for investment, they're going to give you advice. And if you ask for advice, you're more likely to get investment. Now, fundraising, like a lot of things in life, is just a funnel, right? So at the top of the funnel, what you have are all the people who have ever heard you talk about your startup. And we want to make that very wide, right? We want to be able to hit a large number of people in that category. We also want to target anyone who might be in the room. Even though the people who are in the room might not know the industry you're in and might not be investors at all, they're probably one or two connections away from the right person to introduce you to who will be the right person for you. The more that we simplify our pitch, the more that we simplify our deck and the way we talk about this opportunity, the more likely it is that we'll start getting introductions to the right people over time. And that's exactly what I call lily pad hopping, getting one introduction that leads to another. And early on when we're fundraising, what we're gonna wanna do is go hard or go home. We really wanna get as many people interested in the investment opportunity that you're presenting all at the same time, and then define a closing date so that there is a fear of missing out and create a dynamic of scarcity. And that makes people actually take action, because if not, they would rather just wait and see how you do over the next 3-6 months. That's just what they're trying to do. They're trying to mitigate risk, and you don't have time for that. You need to get in and get out so you can focus back on building the company and running operations. Awesome. So the first step of raising money is to create an outreach list and do your research. So at first, you want to get as many names of investors. There are lists out there of investors who invest in startups and angel investors who invest in startups. Now, the next step will be to go ahead and do the research to find out, is this a good investor for me? And is this a good investor for me right now? Now, what do I mean by that? Every investor or investment firm, venture capital firm, has a different route when it comes to investing. They're going to be investing in a specific industry, and usually when it's a venture capital firm, they've already sold that to their LPs. So they can't really invest in all types of companies, only in the categories that they already have experience with. And we'll also see that with angel investors who like to invest in industries that they already know. Right? Now, the first thing you want to do is to go to places like Crunchbase or AngelList to find out what type of companies is this investment firm investing in. The second thing is that you want to make sure that they have money to invest now. As soon as someone raises a fund, a venture capital fund, they're really anxious to get money invested. Right? But as you reach the end, or if they've already finished the investment of that specific fund and are raising another fund, it's really not going to be useful for you because they don't have money to invest at all. So you want to make sure when they raise that fund, if it's too long ago, it might not be a good fit for you. And you also want to find out the new funds because they're more likely to invest right now. And also you want to find out, do they invest at the stage that you're looking to raise, right? If you're looking for $250,000 and you contact a later stage venture capital firm, they'll just be like, we only invest like 10 million at a time. So make sure that they have the money to deploy, make sure that they are the right fit because they invest in the industry that you are in, and make sure that they invest at the stage of company that your company is at. If not, you're wasting your time. And the most important thing to understand is that most investors actually get their leads from connectors. What does that mean? It means that, well, if someone is already investing in your company, then they will want to refer you to other investors who potentially might want to join that round as well. So we want to find who are these connectors. Now, there are several types of connectors and each one has a different level of credibility. The first one and the most credible is someone who has invested in your company, an investor, or who is going to invest in your company, and they're referring you to one of their buddies. Hey, you want to join this round with me? Yes. Are you investing? I am. Let's do it. That's a very credible introduction. Remember, if someone is investing in the stage of company that you're in and in the industry that you're in, but they recommend you to someone and they're not investing, the other company is just going to be like, well, why aren't you investing if this is such a hot deal, right? So that won't work either. You want to make sure it's someone who is investing or who has committed. Now, the second type of warm connector is going to be an entrepreneur. So a founder who has gotten an investment from that specific investment firm or that angel investment, etc., etc. Why? Well, because that individual, that investor already trusts that founder and did their due diligence. So a recommendation from them means a lot more. There's already that trusted bond. So you want to make sure that you also develop relationships with other founders out there. And guess what? You can also ask them, hey, how has this investor been as an investor? If they're like, no, it's been a terrible experience, well, maybe you want to reconsider, right? Now, the third would be a lawyer. Now, lawyers are going to be paid when they are closing the deal. So they have an incentive to introduce you to some people who are going to be in their network who might be willing or interested in investing in the space that you're in. Now, these are a little bit less credible than the first two, but also worth approaching, specifically when you have a lawyer for your company. And then the other type of connector is the friend of the friend. So you can ask any one of your close friends involved in business if they might know anyone in specific sectors. Now, this is one, again, you don't really know whether or not they have a trusted relationship, but it's a good approach as well. And remember, when we're raising investment, we are trying to get ourselves out there as much as possible. So make sure you also join any pitch competition that is possible and also get involved in any entrepreneurial center that is close to you. Now, for these connectors to introduce you effectively, you probably want to write a very short email, potentially also with your sending pitch deck, so your sending deck in there as well, so that they can actually have a quick idea of what you do. Right? And make it very easy for these connectors to connect you to the right people by just having to forward an email to that person and say, hey, if you'd like to get in touch, or hey, this is my friend Sam, etc., etc. The easier you can make it by even writing out that whole email yourself, the easier it's going to be to get those introductions. Now, once you get those introductions and you get your first meeting, understand the first meeting is not where you're going to get a check. So you want to make sure that you spend, if you have a 1 hour meeting, you want to make sure you only spend 20 minutes pitching, and then the rest you want to be answering questions, because that's where all the actual questions will start coming out. Now, when you talk to investors, make sure to not be the know-it-all. Investors don't want you to know everything. In fact, they just want to know that you're moldable and that you're coachable when the time comes to invest in you, that you will take their advice as well, because they have experience. So if you act like you have everything figured out, they're kind of going to suss out the fact that you might have a little bit of BS behind that, right? So ultimately, what you want to do is to be honest. If you don't know something, you can say it. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you've done your homework and that you come seriously prepared so that you can answer any questions seriously. Now remember, you're only trying to get the next meeting. So at the end of any first meeting, you want to make sure, excellent, what is the next step? And get them to lay down the next steps. It might be, okay, we're going to bring this to a partner and now we're going to have that committee review it, or we'll get back to you in X amount of time. Now, a couple of things that I've noticed is that people often just get ghosted by investors, right? Or just get a maybe from investors. Now, ghosted or maybe is a no, and it's totally fine. You'll get plenty of those. Just continue on your roadshow, keep talking to new investors, and don't just rest your laurels on the fact that someone said something really nice during a meeting and it seems like they're going to invest in your company. Keep trying to get access to new investors as you go along, and if nothing else, they'll be able to invest in the next rounds. So don't get discouraged. Keep reaching out to other investors so we can close this round quickly. Now, to close a round quickly, we want to sometimes set a closing date. Now, you don't want to do that too mature. You want to make sure that you have a little bit of interest already from several parties, and then say, hey, we're going to be closing on this specific date if it's a priced round, which means that investors are actually closing down on that. However, what I would recommend is for you to invest or get your investors to invest through a safe note or a convertible note. This allows you not to have to go back and forth about the valuation of your company at a phase where it's very early, and it allows you to cash in the money as soon as someone says yes. Now, once an investor is committed to investing, we can already get them to sign a term sheet and already get them to sign a full contract if it's a safe note, and get that money in the bank as soon as possible. Now, again, there are so many tips and tricks when fundraising. I'll really keep it to that. Remember, you want to be in and out. You want to go hard for a couple months, but more importantly, you want to make sure your company's at the right stage to raise money now. If not, it's a waste of your time, and frankly, it's better if you just go out there and start generating revenue.